Very much welcome everyone to this pre-session to the Leading Complexity program. In the Leading Complexity program, let me see, we have a lot of very interesting speakers. For instance, we will have Gary Hamel as a starting session. We will then have Peter Block, who is been around for quite a while and having this new idea of the leaders being a convener. Woody Sewell, for instance, very much into teaming. Maybe you heard about mob programming earlier, but now he's called it software teaming. Esther Derby, also an old friend of the Agile community. Jos de Block, the amazing story how he could be running healthcare with over 10,000 people, and I think there are only like 40 people in administrative roles, central roles. Fantastic. Henrik Knieberg will be talking about AI, of course. He's very famous with his video. In just a couple of months, he had more than 2 million viewers. I can just dream about that. We also have a very interesting person who was new for me, but now when I hear his story, I'm really interested to hear more. Nand Kashir-Shedari, known for NKC, he was able to create a company creating rugs. And it's 40,000 people that he helped moving away from poverty into having a very nice, a much better life. So he's a social entrepreneur, and very much looking forward to hear more about his session. But the center today will be Sohrab. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your wisdom about leadership. And I think you are the right person to introduce yourself. So I just hand it over to you.
Sure.
Thank you, Sohrab, for showing up.
Yes, sure. Thanks for inviting me. And what a lineup you will have in the coming weeks. Thanks, Thomas, for setting this up to you and the team at CRISP. I'm very delighted to be a pre-session again, as I was, I think, last year or the year before that. I'll introduce myself in a few moments, but what I want to start with is a brief story. And the outcome of that story is basically the quote that you see here: being outraged is not enough. Now, one of the clients that I'm currently supporting is a 403-year-old company based out of Cologne, Germany. It's a publishing company that basically got started right after the Gutenberg press was invented. And for the past 403 years, they have been mainly in publishing. Now, all of you know what happened about 24, 25 years ago with the invention of the internet and the difficulties or challenges that almost every single publishing company was facing. And this company specifically decided to take a different route. Instead of trying to save their publishing business, they invested in a ton of startups, including a group of startups in the marketing technologies field and a lot of other areas. And the CEO himself has put out the slogan, they want to be an AI company. Now, there are still people in that company that are part of the publishing unit. And the publishing units, for example, is a very famous newspaper in the North Rhine-Westphalia region of Germany, specifically in Cologne, where I'm based. So with this company, I'm currently running a leadership development program for the 85 top leaders across the board. So all of the portfolio companies, including the group management board. And one of my participants is a lady who is the chief editor or the vice chief editor, I always forget exactly, of one of those newspapers. And after being in one of my Agile leadership courses, she asked me, Sohrab, would you mind writing an article for us? And obviously, those of you who've probably seen me already on LinkedIn, I really like writing stuff, putting my thoughts on paper and sharing them out there. And I was like, what better opportunity than writing for one of the largest published or newspapers in the region that I live. So I wrote an article about 10 things, and she gave me the title, which was 10 things that you can see in a bad leader, and then obviously turn it into the positive. So how would you also acknowledge or identify a good leader? Now, I did not know how that article would resonate. I had some constraints with regards to the number of letters that I could use, all of that. And initially, it was agreed that the article would be published in the digital version of that newspaper. So I sent it to the chief editor or the vice chief editor. She did not give me any feedback. And I thought, man, that article must have been really, really bad, as she's not giving any feedback. And a few weeks later, she just sent me an email. We published your article. By the way, this is the link. So I was super proud. I go to the website. I see the article is published. Amazing. Now, again, 2 weeks pass. And on Easter Sunday, I receive a WhatsApp message from a close friend who was reading the physical version of that newspaper. And my article had made it into the physical version on Easter Sunday. So he sends me a screen or an image from that article, super happy. I was not expecting to then hear anything from clients, etc. Easter Monday comes, and in our team inbox, that's the email that you can see when you go onto our website, we receive an email from a gentleman called Manfred Maus. And if you are German or if you understand German, right, that name sounds suspicious. It could sound like someone wants to scam you. But my team member, Philip, made a quick research, and he figured out that Manfred Maus is an 89-year-old gentleman, and he is the founder of the hardware store chain OBI, O-B-I. Probably you have seen that hardware store chain in any of your countries. It is super big in Germany and many, many other countries. And this person was the founder. Now, why did he email us? Apparently, the article resonated so much with him that in his email he wrote, I'm very intrigued to getting to know Mr. Salimi better. He does not refer to first name basis, so he goes on the formal way like Mr. Salimi, and talk to him about the challenges of leadership in today's world and share my experiences, so his experiences of 89 years with me, basically. I was obviously super intrigued, super honored, reached out to him, and we met. We met in person a few weeks later, and in our conversation, that was one of those conversations where even someone like me, who is quite talkative, quite extroverted, decided to, man, in this conversation, you just have to listen. There's so much wisdom on the other side. Ask questions from time to time, but other than that, keep both of your ears open and listen to that amazing founder of an amazing company. And as we were speaking, he highlighted that from his perspective, we have a huge lack of leadership across the board, be it in organizations, for-profit or non-profit, be it in politics and society in general, including families. And one of the quotes that stick with me from that conversation was, being outraged is not enough. It's simply not enough to only criticize and only say, oh, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad, but we have to take action. And he, being someone who was born during World War II and then grew up after World War II, obviously built one of the most successful companies in Germany's history after World War II. He said, we need to create a mindset where more and more and more people move into action instead of just being outraged. And this conversation with him, this quote, triggered a lot of thoughts within me. And it ultimately resulted in the model that I will make the center of today's talk for all of you, moving from a victim mindset to a shaper mindset. And now what victim and shaper mean, I will share that with you as we go, but keep this quote, being outraged is not enough, in your mind. So what will we talk about today? I will be presenting on the flip chart because I might add a few things on that. It makes it a bit simpler. And it hopefully gives you the feeling that we are in the same room, although we're not. So what I want to share with you today, number one, understanding the difference between victim and shaper. What do I mean by these terms? How can we make it tangible? Number two, once we understand what the differences are, how do we move from victim to shaper? And especially as leaders, what is our role in helping others move from victim to shaper? Number three, realizing that any kind of change, the changes that we go through ourselves, but also the changes that our teams go through, will be really hard. And accepting it does not mean resignating in terms of the change. Number four, grasping the implications of when we make that decision to become a shaper, of taking action. What does that actually mean? And obviously, across all of these, I will share a bunch of stories similar to the one that I just shared with you. And ultimately, if we still have time, and I hope to get there, I will try to put all of this into perspective. Now, let's get started. I mentioned earlier, I will share with you a few things about myself. Who am I? You can see my name in the recording. My name is Sohrab Salimi. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Scrum Academy based out of Cologne in Germany. We operate a platform which is much broader than the name of our company. And that platform, very innovative, very intelligently chosen, is called Agile Academy. Obviously, I'm joking, but that's the real name. Now, where do I come from initially? I started out as a medical doctor, studied in both Germany and the US. After finishing my medical degree, I decided to do something else, not to go work in the hospital for the next 40, 45 years of my life, as I was still pretty young. I thought I could still expand my horizon. I moved into management consulting, worked almost 3 years for a management consulting firm called Bain & Company. And during my time at Bain, I not only got to learn the tools of any good management consultant, which is Excel and PowerPoint, but I also learned a few skills on how to work with organizations, especially top management. After 3 years at Bain, I decided to leave management consulting, go on the entrepreneurial path, not only be the person who does the presentation and conceptualizing and thinking, but actually go into operations, learn where the difference is between theory and practice. And Thomas, you mentioned earlier, Henrik Knieberg, one of the quotes that I always take from Henrik, and maybe he's not even the inventor of that, but I heard it first from him, is in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. And this is what I wanted to basically experience myself. So I started my first company, the first of many, and also supported my parents' IT consulting company in their internal transformation towards moving from the traditional waterfall model of development of software to agile software development. Now, ever since 2015, thanks to great mentors, including Henrik Knieberg, I became a certified Scrum trainer, and I've been spending roughly 50% of my time teaching or giving talks similar to this one. My teaching is now mostly focused on the leadership topic, because there are so many people out there that can deliver great Scrum Master and product owner courses, but on the leadership side, there's still not enough of us. And this is where I believe I can create the most value with the time that I spent. And the rest of my time, I actually spent helping organizations implement everything that we talk about in theory into practice. So I never lose touch to being in the trenches, including building products and services of our own in our own company. And one of our latest products, again referring to Henrik Knieberg, is an AI coach for agile topics. And that AI coach is also called Henrik, as an homage. Yeah, Thomas, you didn't know that one. That's a surprise to you. So you can all try it out. Just go to our website. You can go on the waiting list. It's absolutely free. Play around with the tool. My team will give you very quick access. And then I'm really curious to get your feedback. Now, enough about me. Let's dive into the topic. And the very first thing, in order to understand the difference between victim and shaper, I want to share two stories with you. And both of them, similar to many stories that I share, are from a personal perspective, like personal experience, many things happening in my family. The first story is about my son. My son is 10 years old. He has been playing football, the European version of that. So any Americans here, soccer, right? Football for ever since he was 5 years old. He loves the sport and he wants to turn pro. Now, he plays 5, sometimes 6 times a week, but the team that he's on has twice a week practice. Nevertheless, last season, the team was really good, and they managed to get into the second highest league of youth players of their age in the region that we are. And as part of being in that second highest league, they play against a ton of other great teams. And in their season opening match, which was a few weeks ago, they played Fortuna Köln. Anybody who is from this area knows that they are like a club with a lot of history, great youth development program and all of that. And my son's team got smashed, 11-0, right? Now, the question, and I would ask you, like when I put out questions, you can feel free to put your response into the chat so that you don't end up on the recording. And I will obviously repeat to the audience that only watches the recording what your responses were. My question to you is, what would you tell your child after such a defeat? Remember, they got smashed 11-0. What would you tell your child after such a defeat? So the first response that comes in, you did a great job. The second one, what did you learn from it? Okay, don't give up. Okay. Thank you, by the way, so far for those that have responded. So when I would tell my son, oh, now the fourth one, let me quickly read this one also, and then I'll give you my perspective. It depends on how my child looks. Maybe, are you frustrated because you were really wanting to win? Probably, right? Making it contextual could also be good. Now, I actually asked my son the same question that Khurram put in here. What did you learn from it? Now, his response, man, Dad, that other team, they were so good. They were dancing circles around us. They probably have a much better trainer. They probably train so much more often than we do. They absolutely have a way better environment, including the sports pitch that they have. And our team, we were just, nobody on the team was running, right? All of that kind of stuff. Now, what kind of mindset did my son display? From the definition that I will be using going forward, he displayed a victim mindset. Nothing about the loss was his own fault, right? And yes, now you can make the argument, if you are just one of 9 team members, at that age, they play 9 against 9, not 11 against 11. Well, I mean, how much responsibility, let alone accountability, can he take, right? So probably he is right criticizing all of those things or coming up, as I refer to it, with victimitis excusitis, right? You see the medical doctor in me creating those kind of terms. It's actually a term that I borrowed from an amazing book written by Robin Sharma called The 5 a.m. Club. If you're interested in book recommendations, read that one. The term victimitis excusitis shows up quite a lot. Now, why do I believe that all of those things were excuses? Because he did not go into thinking, what could he have done differently? So I asked him, Nima, that's the name of my son, what could you have done differently? And the victimitis excusitis mindset immediately showed up again. He's like, nothing. I could not do anything, right? I am just 1 out of 9. Now imagine every person in the world taking that perspective. And I'm not criticizing him. He's 10 years old. It's my job as a father to help him develop a different mindset. So these kind of situations are actually gold because we can use them on an ongoing basis to develop his mentality, but also my own. But imagine everybody in the world would, in the face of every challenge that we're facing, be it global warming or whatever there is, take that perspective. I am just one of, now 8 billion, what can I do? And that's the topic, or that's the challenge of having the victim mindset. It is usually justified, even in society, in organizations, for someone to show up like this, to say this, right? This is not the typical victim of a crime, but this is someone and I always refer to this, that put handcuffs on themselves because they take away their own agency, their own ability to act. Now, let me share a different story. This time, it's about my mom. My parents, based on my looks, you know, I'm not an organic German, as they now refer to in Germany, right? Or as they say, I have an international biography. Let's put it this way. I was born in Iran, and my family came to Germany when I was 4 years old. And obviously, my parents were way older. So my mom was 32, and her engineering degree from Iran was not accepted in Germany. So she, the same with my dad, had to go and study again. Now, within 4 years, she finished chemical engineering at one of the toughest engineering schools in Germany, RWTH in Aachen. That's where I grew up. Now, she graduates in the early 1990s, and back then, the job market in Germany was really slow. So she goes to the job agency. They have like an information event for everybody that got recently graduated. As an engineer, female engineer, she is the only one in that group of about 50 people. And the person from the job agency that was running the event basically spots her, but then addresses to everyone, if you're a woman, you have basically no chance. If you're a migrant, you have basically no chance. If you're a bit older, you have basically no chance, right? And by older, he meant like 30 plus, right? She was 36 at that time, 37 maybe. If you have kids, right, you have basically no chance. And in her head, she's going like, check, 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 check. And all of those are negative checks, right? None of that is positive in terms of, great, my chances just increased. She's like, I have zero chance. So she comes home, and for the first time, as I could remember, other than some kind of family tragedy, somebody dying, I see my mom cry. I ask her, back then I was like 10, 11 years old. I ask her, Mom, everything okay? She's like, we'll talk later. So my dad arrives a few hours later. We had a small apartment back then. Both of my parents were living on a student budget. They go into the kitchen, and my sister and I could hear everything. And again, she bursts out. She shares that story with my dad. That's how I got to know it. And then he asks just one question. Are you ready to give up? Or are you going to fight? What can you do about it? And her response was, I am not done fighting yet. So a very different mindset, obviously way older than my son, but displayed in a way more difficult situation, right? And she was always, up to this day, right, focused on what is it that I can do? And with not having the illusion that she can change everything, but understanding and really believing that she can change something, right? And based on that belief, taking the agency and moving forward. Now, let's dive into the model. When we look at victim and shaper, both of these are the result of the following model. I took some inspiration from a guy called Shreyas Doshi. If you're into product and you're not following him already, he's a great guy to follow, both on X and especially on LinkedIn. And in that model, I just replaced some of the terms here and to some extent also the axis. So on the one hand, we have ability, right? How much skill, talent, whatever, competence does someone bring to the table? On the other axis, vertical, we have agency. How proactive is someone? And based on these two axes, we have 4 quadrants. After all, I'm a management consultant by training, so 2x2s are my thing. Down here, bottom left, low ability, low agency, I refer to those people as losers. Obviously, nobody wants to be a loser. Nobody wants to work with a loser. Nobody wants to recruit a loser, right? So we leave them out of the picture. The rebels are the ones that usually show a lot of agency, right? Proactive, they try to do things, they want to change, but they might lack ability, right? Now, what you do with a rebel, if you happen to manage one of them as a more senior person and they just came into your organization, you obviously try to take them from rebel to shaper. And you can do that by teaching them the ability. And ability is about giving them the context within which your organization operates, teaching them concrete skills, competencies, right? Helping them actually develop the ability. In the medical world, when I used to work in hospitals, it was all about teaching people so that they could become the next generation of doctors. One philosophy that we used was see one, do one, teach one. So first time as a young medical doctor, you observe, right? Next time you do it while somebody else is guiding you. And then the time after that, you become the teacher and you teach somebody else. So obviously it was more than once, but the concept is very well explained with see one, do one, and teach one. Now, at the bottom right, we have the victims. In many cases, people with high ability, but very low agency, right? And these victims, they become the problem in almost any form of organizational change. Be it an agile transformation, as a lot of organizations are going through, a business model transformation towards embracing the digital technologies, AI out there, and so on and so forth, because they always take a back seat. They wait for everybody else to take action because they believe, to some sense, that it does not matter whether they themselves demonstrate any agency. Now, a shaper, in contrast to that, believes that they can always make a difference. And with the ability that they have, the agency that they display, in many cases, they are actually successful. Now, the mindset shifts that we see between victim and shaper are the following. When victims speak, they talk about things that are happening to them. Remember my son? Oh, the opponent was dancing circles around us, right? Whereas if shapers speak, they talk about things that are happening by them. So my son could have said, we were way too passive, right? And one of the questions I asked my son was, did you commit any fouls? He said, no. Did you get any yellow cards? He said, no, very quickly. So it was very clear that their team was not playing aggressive enough, right? So it was not happening to them based on their low display of agency. They were basically there, right? Their heads were down, all of that. The next mindset shift is from feeling powerless, right? I have no power about that, to feeling powerful. Always looking at what is it that I can do in order to make a difference. And ultimately, that results in the third mindset, the shift from being passive to taking action, which is basically then displaying agency. Now, getting back to my mom, that's what she did. She realized that in the chemical engineering space, she would probably not be successful because back then, I mean, Germany had no oil, no gas. Us being from Iran, this was one of the reasons she had selected that subject in the first place. All the coal mines were being closed down, so no need for that. She made a transition into the IT space, found a really, really good job as an IT consultant, and then a few years later, with my dad together, founded their own company, which then they grew to 40 people, right? Victim versus shaper. Now, one of the quotes that I'd like to close this first section with is from my dad, which really displays how we can demonstrate agency. He always shared with me when he was trying to acquire a new client, and his mindset was, when they walk you out of the door, find a window to get back in, right? And to this date, when I try to acquire a new client, does not mean that I break in somewhere, right? But that I look at every opportunity on how we can get involved with that client. How can we get engaged? What is it that I can do? Is there a session that I can run with them? Can we demonstrate a good case study about this? Can we get a referral from somebody else, right? And what is it that we can do in the short term, in the midterm, in the long term? But always thinking about what is it that we can do and not complaining, oh, the client just doesn't get it, they have been bribed or whatever, right? Move from victim to shaper. Now, moving on to the next story. As part of the work that I do, I mentioned earlier that we now support a lot of organizations on their transformation journey. one of the clients that I'm supporting is a large retailer. And that retailer is amazing. They have almost a 100-year history. They have been really strong in terms of doing that transformation. And as part of that, given they have a long-term focus, we already see some results. But we also see a few things that might, at least from my perspective, are not ideal. So let me share a story with you. One of the leaders that I work with in that organization, let's call her Diana, has the challenge that within their organization, in the past, they were very well respected because of their attention to detail, right? Being really meticulous, pointing out things like a double space in a PowerPoint or any other type of attention to detail that you can display. Now, moving towards more agile ways of working, from time to time, that leader, right, Diana, has received some feedback from other people in the organization being too critical, right? Not having the right mindset in terms of like not the right agile mindset. And what happened was that Diana dialed it down a bit. And in our coaching sessions, I was talking to her and I said, Diana, you don't have to dial down your ability to criticize. What you have to develop is something else, right? Because dialing down your ability to criticize basically means I am seen as somebody who is too critical, right? People perceive me this way. I am the victim. Instead of taking an action to change something for the better, I actually change something for the worse. What do I mean by that? Another 2x2 from the consultant. The model that I want to share with you here is how I look at the key roles of any leader in any organization. And leaders could be formal and informal leaders. So people that have direct reports, but also scrum masters, product owners, whatever informal leadership there is. And when we look at this, on the one hand, we have the ability to challenge someone. On the other, the ability to support someone. If you are down here, low challenge, low support, I refer to you as a neglector. If you are no challenge, high support, I refer to you as a comforter. High challenge, low support is a critic, and then high challenge, high support, Thomas, probably you're also familiar with the term, the catalyst leader, right? Now, as we mentioned earlier, Diana was down here. Now, you can look at this and say, of course, right? It's not ideal because ultimately we want people to be up there, right? We want people to be high challenge, high support, and Diana is currently right here. Now, why did Diana, instead of moving up there, dial down their criticism and ultimately became a neglector? What do you think? Take a moment, write it in the chat.
Do you see the question in the chat as well, Sohrab?
Yes, I write the right answer.
Thank you.
Sorry, what was the question again? Just the last question.
Why did Diana move from critic to neglector instead of moving from critic to catalyst? No idea right now. No problem. So let me share a few things with you. Number one, when we criticize people in terms of any skill or characteristic that they display, and we don't show them how they can do it differently, the natural reaction is to just do less of what we're criticizing. So as Diana does not know how to support, while at the same time challenging, because a lot of people look at this as either I support or I challenge, right? If you think about the books written by, forgot his name, Good to Great, Built to Last, Jim Collins, right? If you think about those books, Jim speaks about the tyranny of the or and the genius of the and, right? Because in most cases, people look at support or challenge, or as Hendrik Niebuhr puts it out there, autonomy or alignment. But what we want is and. We want autonomy and alignment. We want challenge and support. But most people that are down here don't know how to do this. So instead of moving up, they move to the left. They dial down their ability to criticize. Now, for an organization, having more and more people move from critic to neglector is not good, because that could be perceived as people are giving up, could be perceived as like people are letting things slide, the quality bar goes down instead of raising the quality bar. So what I believe, something valuable that we can do as coaches, as trainers, at whatever, right, as leaders, is to teach people how to challenge and support at the same time. So going back to the initial story, right, my dad displayed a really good way of challenging and supporting. He said, do you want to give up? After everything that you've been through, that's the challenge. The support that he provided was, whatever you need me to do as your husband, I'll do, right? If you need me to take more care of the kids so that you can, for example, pursue another field of study, go ahead, do it. I'll take care of that, right? That's challenge and support. Coming back to Diana, it could be still being very meticulous in terms of like the level of quality and all of that, attention to detail, and at the same time, taking time to enable people to be up to what they want to see in terms of level of quality. When we talk about leadership, one of the key concepts that we refer to is enablement first, empowerment second. What do I mean by that? In most organizations, everybody's talking about, oh, we need to empower people. We need to empower people, which means we give decision-making authority to people. Now, if people lack the context, lack the competence, lack the courage, how do we expect them to become decision makers? It does not make any sense. So before we empower them, we need to enable them. That's the support piece. And as we do that, we can constantly challenge them and show them through our challenge where the bar is, right? Amazon refers to this in their recruiting as the bar raiser, somebody who constantly puts up a high bar. Why? Because we want to increase the level of competence, creativity, and so on and so forth within our organizations, challenge and support. Now, fortunately, more and more of these leaders, right, that we work with and take on that mindset where they understand the genius of the end, and where we teach them how to be more supportive while at the same time challenging to their teams. So one way to move from victim to shaper is to first and foremost pull yourself out. If we don't understand, if we don't acknowledge where we ourselves, and everybody does that, right? We might be a shaper in one area and a victim in another area. And once we spot that, once we have the awareness for that, it is our job to pull ourselves out. Now, once we do that, we role model the behavior. We demonstrate to people that we constantly ask, what is it that I can do? We can also help others do that. So the challenge would be, what is it that you can do when people show up to you? And the support would be, let's go into solutionizing together. So one of the techniques that I share, for example, in my Agile Leadership course, and Thomas, you're probably familiar with that as well because it's from Bill Joyner, the Catalyst Conversation, is nothing short but challenge and support, right? In a very simple tool, in a very simple conversation style. If you don't know how it works, look it up or attend one of the courses that either of us run. Now, as we have established a few ideas on how to move into becoming more of a shaper, we have to think about transformations. Now, transformations are usually quite hard. And in one of the sessions that I was running, a course participant in day 2 of our course, at some point she raised her hand. Her name was Sue. And Sue asked, Sohrab, why is it so hard? Why can't it be any smoother? As I usually do, I threw the question back at the course and asked everyone, like, what would you respond to Sue? And everybody was thinking, nobody had a real answer. And I just said, anything meaningful in life, right? Anything that we want to achieve is hard, anything. But the important thing is we also have to acknowledge that if we don't aim for the hard thing, it will still be hard, just in a different way. Let me give you a few examples. Aligning on a vision for a company, an organizational unit, or a product is hard. If we don't align on a vision for a company, an organizational unit, or a product, it's also hard because on a daily basis, teams, individuals will be working on completely different things, and there will be a lot of friction, and everybody will be frustrated. It's hard, right? So both of them are hard. We have to choose our hard. Next, collaborating across the organization. Really hard. If you just look at how many scaling frameworks there are, forget about the agile ones, right? There's so many ways of how you can set up an organization in order to maximize value for customers or maximize efficiency or whatever, right? All of that, doing that, having everybody be disciplined is hard. But if we don't do that, and everybody works in the way they believe is the right thing to do, it's also hard, right? Choose your hard. Getting customer feedback. The first time you show a product to a customer, I love this quote from Mike Tyson, right? Everybody has a plan until you punch them in the face. It feels like that because suddenly all the assumptions you had in your mind, they just break down like a house of cards. So getting that feedback is hard. But if you don't get that feedback and build on those assumptions that you have not validated, ultimately, you will build something that no user wanted. And getting to that realization after 2 years and 10 million euros or whatever you've spent, very hard, right? So in that case as well, choose your heart. And ultimately, changing our organizations to whatever direction we believe is now necessary, as what I'm doing, for example, with that retailer or with that publishing company, any form of change, as Sue had rightfully identified, is hard. But if we don't change our organizations for different ways of working, we will probably also not get any other outcomes. Choose your hard. Now, one of the favorite quotes I've heard in that space is from a long-term mentor of mine, Daryl Rigby, who is the head of Agile and Innovation Practice at Bain, my former employer. And Daryl always says to clients who say, we really don't know if we need innovation. It's really hard. He says, if you believe innovation is hard, try stagnation, right? For almost every CEO, they're like, oh my God, we cannot stagnate. We need to change. And that quote really triggers that step. Now, what I want to do, as we have established, right? What is a victim? What is a shaper? A few things, how we can pull ourselves out of that victim mode. Also understanding or acknowledging that it is hard, which does not mean that we resignate, but acceptance is the first step towards actually displaying agency. I want to show you what are the implications of us taking action. Now, some of you might know Brian Chesky as the founder and CEO of Airbnb. A few weeks ago, Brian gave a talk about founder mode, right? How he believes that it was necessary that as a founder, he stepped back in more and more into the organization, as at the beginning of COVID, Airbnb had lost 80% of their revenues, right? And what he shares is not that he displayed, micromanagement, but that he really got into the weeds, into the details. Amazon refers to this in their leadership principles as number 12, dive deep, right? No task is beneath them. And leaders can differentiate between anecdotes and data, or when they acknowledge when anecdotes and data differs. So Brian shares this story on how he, stepping back in as a founder and CEO and being so much more in the weeds, transformed Airbnb. And as part of that, of course, during COVID, it was hard. They had to let go a bunch of people, refocus the organization, and so on and so forth. Now, as part of that story, I want to bring in a third model. This time, it's not a two by two. I hope you're not disappointed. It's probably a tool that many of you are familiar with from Stephen Covey, the circles of control and circles of influence. Now, when we move from victim to shaper and demonstrate agency in our circle of control, what might happen with that circle? Any ideas? Get bigger, right? So that circle might or probably will expand, right? As we take action, let's make it concrete. You are someone in the organization, maybe you're not at the very top, but there's a challenge in the org. You identify that challenge, you come up with the solution, you work on it. Now, what will your boss do in the future? A good boss. They will probably say, hey, this Thomas guy, he not only is very able or capable of doing stuff, he also demonstrates the right level of agency or proactivity. In the future, let's give him more decision-making authority, which means our circle of control just got bigger, right? It expanded. On the other hand, if we demonstrate a victim's mindset, what happens? It gets smaller. So every time, and this is why I say we're putting handcuffs on ourselves, every time we move into victim mode, our circle of control gets smaller. And the same applies to our circle of influence. If we do a really good job by presenting to our organizational units head, right? He might say, hey, next time we're presenting to the CEO, I want you to be there. Now, the CEO really enjoys how you present stuff, right? And help them make a decision, which means you are not making that decision, but you're influencing that decision. That same CEO might say, next time, I want you to present to the board of directors. Again, your circle of influence expands. On the contrary, if we display the victim mindset, both circles become smaller, become tighter, like the handcuffs that we're putting on our hands. So when we think about moving from victim to shaper, it's not only for us to understand, like now we can do stuff and get more acknowledgement and all of that. It's also something where we change the culture of an organization. One of my favorite quotes on culture, because culture, right, in many cases, it's not tangible. If we talk about culture as our shared values or whatever, is not really tangible. One of my favorite definitions is culture is the next 5 minutes. How we show up in the next 5 minutes determines to some extent, changes to some extent, the culture of an organization. So when we decide to be a shaper, we not only role model that behavior and not only change or expand our circles of control and influence, we also change the culture of our organization. Now, going back to the very first story of my son that I shared with you, you've probably seen football matches where one team is almost getting smashed, right? And then one player, just one, says, this is enough, right? Being outraged is not enough. We have to take action. And that one player decides to take action. It could be a tackle that they do. It could be arguing with the referee. It could be like screaming really loud at his team members or whatever. And I'm not encouraging anybody, right, to show or to tackle somebody at work or like scream at your employees or your colleagues. But on the football pitch is different. And that change in behavior, it's not even the next 5 minutes, it's the next 90 seconds, is infectious. If we move from victim to shaper, it's infectious. The same way that victimitis excusitis is infectious, becoming a shaper can also be infectious. It just takes one other player on that team to change their body language, move from being like this to being like this, right? Facing the opponent. Every time they get the ball, make it hurt, right? Tackle them, even if it means you're making a foul. In the case of football, it's fine. At work, you have to figure out different ways. But body language, right, is a great way to quickly change the way you approach things and change the culture and the standard that you want to set at an organization. And leaders, first and foremost, from my perspective, are responsible for those standards, are responsible for the culture. So always keep that in mind. Culture is the next 5 minutes. Now, in order to close, I have one final story as I want to end here. And that story also wants to put everything, or I aim to put everything into perspective. Because as we acknowledged, it can be really hard from time to time, right? But then as we do things differently, we get accustomed to those things, we develop new habits, it also becomes smoother until it becomes hard again. Now, when I was a kid, right, one of the only memories I have from my time in Iran was that my grandfather, and I was mostly staying with my grandparents as both of my parents were working, there were no kindergartens and so on and so forth, that my grandfather came home as a truck driver once a week, sometimes twice a week. And the first thing he would do was he would like take off his clothes and go take a shower. Now, I was a 1.5-year-old boy running around, still having my diapers on. And whenever he came, I would like take off everything and join him in the shower. That was like one of the big joys that I had. And he, from his youth, he had a bunch of tattoos on his body. And some tattoos were images, like a lion, etc. But some tattoos were writings. And they were writings in Farsi, or the correct term would be like Arabic letters. And I asked him later, when he visited us for the first time in Germany, I was like, Grandpa, I remember you had tattoos. You still have them on you. And then he showed those tattoos to me. And I could obviously, as a kid, not read what was written there. So I asked him, Grandpa, what does that mean? And it was an Iranian proverb stating, this too shall pass. And I asked him, I was like, what does that mean, Grandpa? And he said, when you're facing a hard time, reminding yourself that this too shall pass, what does it give you? It gives you hope, right? If you're facing good times and you remind yourself, this too shall pass, it gives you appreciation for those good times, right? And he had appreciation. And he had that tattoo on his arm. I never managed to get one because my wife would kill me, right? But it always reminded him of no matter what kind of time he was facing, hard times, it gave him hope. And that hope gave him agency so that he could move through those hard times way faster, right? And good times gave him appreciation. So he would try to, again, be having agency, suck in every single element of that good time that he was experiencing. And after my grandfather passed away, I wanted to keep that memory of him. So I created a ring for my mom where we had like the birthstones of myself, my sister, my dad, her parents, all of my kids and my sister's kids. And as a writing inside of that ring is, this too shall pass. So what I want you to leave with, in addition to having like that mindset shift, hopefully from victim to shaper, understanding that transformation, both your internal, but the external transformation is hard, and acknowledging that every time you push, your circles of control and influence will widen instead of get more and more tight. When you're facing challenging times or good times, remind yourself, this too shall pass. So this gives you hope and appreciation. With that said, thanks so much for being here, for participating in this virtual session. I really enjoyed it. And many thanks to you, Thomas, for re-inviting me to this pre-session of your Leading Complexity series.
Thank you very much, Sohrab. And I must say, I go for this too shall pass with appreciation. It's been a really good time. Also, hopefully you have moved some people from rebel to shaper by sharing your knowledge. Before we say thank you to everyone, I would like to just share some things with you. Let's see if I can share my screen a little bit. Okay, let's see if we have it there. Oh, sorry, remove this. Here you go. So first of all, this is part of a program called the Leading Complexity Program. And if you want to join, which I hope everyone will, because it will be just like Sohrab, a lot of really interesting people to talk to and listen to, and it will be a little bit longer sessions and more time for questions and all that. And those are really top thinkers, just like Sohrab, in those sessions. And you have a promo code here because you were participating, so you will get 20% off of the cost there. leadingcomplexity.com. Secondly, if you sign up, you will also get access to earlier sessions. So hopefully you know some of the names. So then they have their master classes. We call it master classes because these are really the masters of their different frameworks that they are talking about. If you want to learn more, you could also listen into the Leading Complexity podcasts that I and my colleague Michael Göte is running, where we are interviewing a lot of interesting people and we are also explaining a little bit about their concepts. So by that, I just want to say thank you very much, Sohrab, for having a great time together with us. And thank you, everyone, showing up, and have a very nice rest of the day.